So we had Lord Lawless said, you want rules for all things. What does partial success mean for interpretive dance in diplomacy? But also complain that remembering and looking up more than one resolution mechanic is too hard. These aren't compatible positions. After 35 years of gaming, I'm firmly in the referee adjudication camp and rulings over rules camp. Well, first of all, is that true? So, I mean, I want to talk about that. Is that true? That those aren't compatible positions. You want rules for all the things, but then complain also when remembering and looking up more than one resolution mechanic is too hard. Is it true that those aren't compatible? After 35 years of gaming, I'm firmly in the referee adjudication and rulings over rules camp. Maybe adjudication is a skill that comes easily to me. I find it trivial to say that a X in 6 chance of success, or a roll for hit for that, or to make a save, and what consequences of failure are. 1, I don't sweat the small stuff. Main reason for D6. It's much easier to fret and internally squibble over percentages of a D20 based system. Is that a 16 or a 17 DC? 1 is hard. 2 is iffy. 3 is 50-50. 4 is easy. Higher than that, probably don't roll and just let the players have it. It's better to be fast and fun than simulationist. Now, I do like this. I think this is a great point, too, that he's saying go for a D6, which I haven't specifically heard that. Of course, maybe that's something like easy D6, but okay, just use a D6 then, because you can get really down in the weeds on, gee, is this a 16 or 17 DC? And I agree that you shouldn't do that, because as we were looking at all the dice videos and trying to do the dice analysis, that if you've got a 16 or 17 DC, or whether that's a +1 or a +2 or something like that, it's probably not going to matter much anyway. And I talked about that when we were looking at those dice videos. It's probably not worth worrying about, because the chance that particular +1 bonus or that particular +1, that 5%, is unlikely to probably adjust the outcome anyway. You're much more based on just the dice roll anyway. So yeah, I agree with that. Don't sweat the small stuff and try to spend a whole lot of table time figuring out 16 or 17 or a +1 or a +2. This to me is an argument that says, well, maybe we shouldn't have 16 or 17 DCs. That's why it would be like the DCs are only 10, 15, 20, 25. Is it easy, hard, medium, something like that? That's kind of the same thing he's saying here. So, but over here with the D6, that here's hard, here's easy, here's very easy to think in terms of that. I want it to be easy to be thinking in terms of DCs as well. This is easy, this is hard, this is not. But his point still stands, because even if the DCs are easy, are you sweating the small stuff and trying to come up with +1s and +2s? And probably chances are you should not. That seems to be a waste of table time. More time spent than actually stuff you get out of it. 2, everything in the game, BX, this is the basic and expert, is simple, geared toward player-referee interaction. Instead of feats, characters, and abilities, they're just players saying, my character does and tries X. Adjudication derives naturally from that. By the way, given no special talent circumstances, I'd rule the interpretive dance as impossible, which means it somehow works on a natural 20. So I would use impossible in a different way. I'm using impossible like when I'm doing design, I mean, it actually can't be rolled for. Now he does say I don't do partial success. Instead, improv and roll 2d6 reaction check. Positive, you attract attention of courtesans. Up to the players to exploit that or not. Negative, your performance is viewed as vulgar and you are ejected from court. Players must now pursue another path to their goal. So what do we think about this? Oh, lots of thoughts here. Okay. So Sable Phoenix says, I don't think those are incompatible positions. Tiny D6 RPG or an easy D6 uses a single resolution mechanic. Actually, so does Savage Worlds. Roll a particular die against a TN size of 4. So it wasn't so. What he's saying is incompatible here, and I have my own thoughts on this. Is having rules for everything. So making sure that that was our problem with rules light stuff, is that it was requiring, or as we talked about here. Our problem was that my problem was that if you were going to have something like partial success, now that's one option we'll talk about here in a moment. You don't have to have partial success, because the game does not have to do that, because that's what sometimes is what's sending us into this spiral here about, well, a rules light game says, hey, you could be partially successful at something, but then leaves that to players, including the game master, to adjudicate kind of on the fly, which I've found is kind of difficult even for creative people to do all of that on the fly. But then also I don't want to complain about, I don't want to have to look up more than one resolution mechanic. James says, pretty sure the positions are plenty compatible. Not wanting vagaries inherent to simple things like a partial success actually simplifies the game, therefore reducing the need to look things up. There are all sorts of ways, Sable Phoenix says, that a TN of 4 can be modified, going back to the Savage Worlds example, but that's still always what you're rolling against. Also, having fast fun over simulation is not better if your players want a simulationist game. Right. I'm working on less of a simulationist game. We're talking for Faded Edge here, because I enjoy both. If there are people who want to play a simulationist type game, then hey, I could be all for it. If there was the players friends who were having fun with. But it seems like I have more players if I'm not doing a simulationist game. PH Arbist says, I really like using D6. 1 is fail, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are difficulties, and 6 explodes. Wait, does he state how the positions aren't compatible and then proceeds to tell you how he himself makes them compatible? He kind of does. He does say that he does not. Doesn't he say that he does not use partial success? Oh, yeah. He says, I don't do partial success, but instead improv. And he seems to say, so it is, yeah, maybe there is some room for interpretation there. Because that's one way, that these are incompatible. I just have dice roll and either you're successful or you're not. Well, if that's the situation, okay, I'm not doing partial success. You're going to roll a d6 and then either you're going to be successful based on that roll or you're not. The adjudication in that sense is binary, right? Adjudication derives naturally from that. But that's a binary outcome. Because that's one thing you can do. You don't have to have partial success. One option is, are you going to have partial success in the game? Yes or no. You don't have to have partial success. You can do what it sounds like he's saying up here at the top and just say, of course, this could be with anything. Here's what you're going to do. Is this difficult? Is this hard or easy? Roll the die, and then there's a binary outcome. Either it's successful or it's a failure. That gives you rules for a lot of things. But that gives you a lot of rules for a lot of things with a unified action resolution mechanic without having to get into partial success. So Sable Phoenix says it looks like he's undermining his own argument. Neutromancer says it's not the mechanic they're talking about, but the outcome. Neutromancer says, I don't want to have to come up with a consequence for rolling X. The game should tell me straight up is the desire here, I think. I don't want to have to come up with, on the fly, something strange to adjudicate a situation. If it's a bizarre situation, I want the dice to tell me. Like I don't want the game to force the players into having to come up with some kind of bizarre situation, adjudicate some kind of bizarre situation on the fly. It's just pretty easy to adjudicate success and failure, but if it's a weird thing, then I don't want to have to do that. D20 BGD says D20 is popular because it is proven and intuitive. It has proven and intuitive granularity. To say that a bonus doesn't matter is a bit misleading. It matters 5%. People can get their heads around that. When you get boons from multiple sources, those 5% bumps add up quickly towards success. Yes, it does. So if you're talking about the difference, if you're adding those up and you're talking about the difference between a +2 or +7 or +9 or a +10, well then yes, when you're adding them up, it matters. What I was saying is that how much time, if you're unsure whether or not when you're rolling a D20 like target number system, if you're unsure whether you have a +3 or a +4, how much game time should you lose or should you expend at the table to decide whether or not that's a +3 or a +4? Because you're talking about just a +1, which is a 5% difference. So how often is, and you're rolling a D20, which is a very random and a lot of variation, and you're trying to decide whether you've got a +3 or a +4, how often is that actually going to matter? How often is that additional +1 going to be the decisive factor? Because you're already very random. I mean, we know exactly it's 5%. So we just have to make a call about how much game time is it worth trying to figure out. I mean, if you got it on your character sheet, then you know, like if it's something really static and used. But if you're like trying to adjudicate now exactly what are all the modifiers for this particular situation, if you miss one of them, arguably, it's better to keep going than try to make sure that, oh, no, hold on. Let's consult the rule book. Is this a +3? Do I actually get this this other bonus for a +4 or not? Sable Phoenix says, like the favorite saying in Pathfinder 2nd E, every +1 matters. Neutromancer says, for example, you need a table for partial success for lockpicking. Failure by 2 means it gets stuck. By 3 means noise. By 4 means a roll on a separate table or just come up with something. Okay, so tables was something I was about to talk about. Neutromancer says, I think the incompatible position is either you want to have a table or you complain about having a table. I personally do not want to have a table. But table is one way to go about it. You know what? I think that Ironsworn actually torpedoes what this guy is saying. If you can design a game that's playable solo while being powered by the apocalypse, then you absolutely can make firm checks with partial successes and non-specific results. The only alternative to coming up and using a lookup table would be something like Blade Runner. Partial success just means you lose a point of whatever. James says partial success is just a failed action with some random benefit. You fail to unlock the door, but you loosen it in the jam. Then you can be completely removed from play. These can be completely removed from play because the end result isn't significantly different from a standard failure. The door still ain't open.